Tula's Tips for Caregivers. Health is on the air with Tula Wooten, your source to go for resources and information to help you in this rewarding but sometimes challenging role. Now here's Tula.
Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tula's Tips for Caregivers. I know many of you have been listening for a long time, and you know that I've been doing this radio show for about 10 years now, and I've transitioned it into a podcast in the last couple of years so that you can listen anytime you want to, and it's a little easier for me to record whenever I can. But thank you for tuning in today. I really appreciate the caregivers who have been following me through the years. It is an honor to be before you, to help you and to encourage you, sometimes to give you resources to help you take care of your loved one. Those are a lot of my goals. Today, my guest is someone who's become a friend over the years. His name is Peter Rosenberger. He is also a radio show host for caregivers. He has a show called Hope for the Caregiver, and he also has a book by the same name. Most importantly, he's been taking care of his wife for over 35 years. And I'll let you talk a little bit about that. But first, welcome to the show, Peter.
Tula, it is always a treat to be with you, and thank you so much. I just have also come to just value you as a friend, as a fellow caregiver, and as somebody who understands the journey in ways that few do. And sometimes I feel like when veteran caregivers themselves meet, it's got to stand on the side of the field of battle and have a cup of coffee while it all rages around us.
Because it is raging around.
But it's good to compare notes.
It is good to compare notes. I think nobody understands like another caregiver. So
for me, Tula, when I sit down with you and when I talk with you, I get to speak in my own language. I speak fluent caregiver. When you're around somebody else who speaks fluent caregiver, it's great to kind of turn your brain off and just be able to speak in your native tongue for a while, And I mean, I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's what it feels like when I talk with you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I do think we understand each other. We understand the journey that you're still on and that I've been on, and I try to help so many people through because it can be a very difficult journey. Today, I'd love the fact that you have talked about this already because it's something I've not talked about on my show, but I'd love to talk about stillness as a caregiver. I'm a believer. I know you're a believer, and this show, I'd really like to take it from a Christian standpoint and minister to those out there who need to hear the message that you have today. And we're going to talk about being still. It's really hard to do.
It is
for me.
I think it's hard. I think it's hard by nature for us to do as human beings. And when you live with the relentless struggle and pressures of caregiving, it just exacerbates that even more. That your mind is running at 900 miles an hour, and it's almost jarring to be still because you're moving so fast. For me, it is anyway, and I found that to be the case with a lot of caregivers. In fact, if you give the caregiver an afternoon off, a lot of us don't know what to do with that afternoon.
I found that to be true, too.
We stay kind of amped up and agitated, and by the time we calm ourselves down, it's time to go back and be a caregiver again or whatever. It is very difficult to carve that out, and I've come to understand that is the human condition. I mean, if you look at the majority of Scripture, I mean, the number one commandment in Scripture is to fear not. I think the second one is to be still. We're a fearful, agitated people. And God knows that, and that's why he repeats himself so often throughout Scripture. Hey, be still. Settle down, y'all. That's the Southern King James Version.
I like the Southern Version. God knows us. He made us, and he knows he has to repeat over and over to get through to at least my thick skull.
I'm with you. I'm tracking with you. And I didn't get to be the crash test dummy of caregivers for no reason, I mean, I keep slamming into this wall. And everything I've learned through most often painful failure. And I've learned that stillness is intentional. You don't accidentally become still. I think, Tula, and Steve, this resonates with you. I think that I've had to learn that rest and sleep are two different things.
Explain that.
Well, we're going to go to sleep. You get tired enough, you'll fall asleep. But that doesn't mean you're at rest. We can be at rest in our waking moments, because rest is, I think, is a state of mind. Sleep is a state of body, but rest is a state of mind and heart. You know, Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He didn't say I was going to give you sleep. You know, he said, "I'll give you rest."
In that rest, I think you're calling it a state of mind, a state of heart. What came to me, as you said it, is a state of peace. And I think that's what he's calling us to.
And we are so agitated. You know, we live in the wreckage of our futures. Of what are we going to do if this happens? What are we going to do if this happens? What are we going to do if this happens? And all these doomsday scenarios play out in our minds and our hearts. And then we go back and we replay all of our failures, and then we replay all the failures that people have inflicted upon us. It's no wonder we can't get any rest as caregivers. We carry a list of grievances against others, and we carry a list of grievances against ourselves. And so one of the things I tell my fellow caregivers to do, part of the process of rest for me is starting to evaluate myself properly. And I have to remind myself of this, and I expect you to remind me of this as well, because I'm going to need it. I think that we look at ourselves improperly. We are so busy judging ourselves by our failures, which we have plenty of. As caregivers, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail miserably. And that's just going to happen. If you put any kind of time into this, you'll come to understand the concept of failure in ways that you never did before. But if we're going to judge ourselves by our performance, then I ask my fellow caregivers to be fair, and let's judge ourselves also by our attendance record, which is flawless because we keep showing up.
We keep showing up, doing what we know we need to do.
Yeah, even if we're swearing, we're bloody, bedraggled, and cussing and everything else, we still keep showing up. Well, how does that help us be still? Well, first off, it helps us get some balance in our life that, wait a minute. We're not the wretched failures that we castigate ourselves for. We're individuals who are doing something almost impossible. It really is an impossible task. And we're doing it armed only really with love. None of it, there is no caregiver university. You know, none of us have any formal training in caregiver. We may have formal training in some caregiving task, but the reality of a caregiver is so much more than the task. And that's one of the things I really address on my show repeatedly. I rarely get into the task of caregiving, which, once I learn how to give an injection, I got it. Once I learn how to fight with a doctor, I got it. Once I learn how to fight with an insurance company, I got it. That's the one and done part of caregiving. I don't need a refresher course on those things. But what I do need a refresher course on is dealing with my frenetic heart and the anxiety and the angst that's in my heart. And that starts with seeing myself objectively, because I don't think I can, without help, see myself objectively. If I saw somebody doing what I do, man, I would go to that person and just hug them and be gracious to them. And yet we won't be gracious to ourselves. How are we going to rest if we're so busy flogging ourselves? How are we going to learn to be still if every moment we have to be still, that's when we take out our notebook of all of our failures or all of our grievances or all of our fears?
Thank goodness the Lord doesn't look at us and see all of our failures.
No.
And all the things we're afraid. Thank goodness that's not what he sees when he looks at us.
Absolutely not. And even in our failures, he is constantly weaving those things out to his glory anyway. That's what he does. But when we start seeing ourselves with a little bit more clarity, then it may give us a chance to take a little deeper breath and realize, okay, all right, maybe it's okay for me to just sit here for a moment. And knowing that I'm going to get back up in the game, I'm going to keep showing up and doing the job, but I'm going to learn to be a good steward of me. And I've had to learn that over the years. When you reach your 35th year as a caregiver and you're dealing with a medical nightmare that doesn't show any signs of slowing down, it gives you a little bit of perspective. And it provides you with a little bit more clarity of thought. Okay, what's the goal here? And so many people, when they start their caregiving journey, the goal is, I'm going to see Mama through this until she gets to Jesus, and then I'll get on with my life. Mm-hmm. Well, now in my 35th year, at some point it has to dawn on me that this is my life. You know,
yeah, this is your life.
This is my life.
For whatever reason,
I can't wait until yeah. I'm not going to put my life on hold, and I'm not going to put my need for rest on hold. You can't do that for 35 years. I'm not going to put my need to see and experience beauty around me on hold. And I think that's the mental shift for me that came along as a caregiver when I realized that, wait a minute, I didn't have to have everything peachy keen for me to have joy. I could still have tears on my cheeks, but still see joy and beauty around me at the same time.
I like
and
that.
There is that mental shift that happens when you see that. You realize, oh, okay. And I stopped trying to be happy. We pursue happiness as if it's something we can grasp, and I don't think we can. I think happiness is something that happens along the way. Mm-hmm. And we will have moments of happiness, but I found that for me was a less than worthwhile pursuit. And instead, I tried to reorient my thinking and pursue healthiness. I want to be healthy.
Happiness is fleeting anyway. It's just like you said.
It is.
Few moments.
It happens.
It just happens, and it's more superficial, if you will. It's on the surface, where, in my view anyway, joy, deep abiding joy, is a much deeper thing that you don't lose. You can, but if you're focused right and you're focused on the Lord and you take time to be still, that's where you get your joy, and it's a much deeper, much real thing than happiness. Am I right?
You are exactly right, and that's why I've started changing this around in my own life. And I said, okay, I'm going to walk away from this quest that the world says to be happy. I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy. No, I don't think so. I think I'm going to be healthy. I want to be healthier. Healthiness is intentional, and I want to be healthy emotionally, physically, financially, professionally, spiritually, relationship-wise. And the most important relationship that I have in my life, the person I spend the most time with, is myself. And if I'm at odds with myself, how can I be in a positive relationship with anyone else, including God? Yeah. You know, how can I? Because I'm going to look at God with distrust because I'm already at odds with myself, so I'm not even in a good place. And so I think as you go through all of Scripture, you realize that you see these things in a different light. You know that God is actively working to lead us into a place where we can learn to be still and learn to be at peace no matter what's going on around us.
And Peter, I know you have a lot going on around you. How do you do that? I mean, tell us just briefly, because I know it's a long story, but tell us about your wife and what you do.
Well, Gracie had a car wreck before I met her that messed her up pretty bad. And we met at college. She resumed her career at college, and that's where we met. And she had a significant limp, but just this beautiful, extraordinary young woman, and amazing singer, the whole thing. And I was a pianist. She was a singer. And I saw this extraordinary person and fell in love with her, but I had no idea what it was like to be in a relationship with somebody with a broken body. And she'd had about 20 surgeries by the time I met her. Well, that's mushroomed up now to 80 that I can count and 150 other smaller procedures that I can count. Wow. She gave up both of her legs, one after each of our boys were born. And she lives with significant pain. I mean, orthopedically, she's a train wreck. And there's always something going on. And just when I think we got a handle on one thing, there's something else. I mean, she got the coronavirus. She's the first person in our county out here in Montana to get it. Oh. She got pretty sick. She punched through it, and she got through it okay. And I think clean air and clean water out here was a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And she's worked hard to build up her immune system after years of antibiotics have trashed her. Yeah. So I think that helped a lot. I didn't get it from her. I ended up testing positive a little later. Got it from other people who came out here when the summer months opened up. And I didn't. I tested positive, but I didn't really have any significant symptoms that I don't normally have, like hay fever, that kind of stuff. So I've been donating plasma for convalescent plasma. But our story is a rather large one, and she lives with significant medical challenges that never seem to plateau. So every day is a new day of flexibility. You know, I don't think it's in the Bible, but it ought to be, not ought to be, but it sounds like it should. When you say, blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. And so you have to roll with these things. You have to absorb the constant changing of things that when you feel like the rug is pulled out from underneath you. And so for me, I had to come to a point where I was going to intentionally do things that would settle me down. I'm a pianist. I've been a pianist since I was 5. I trained in it, and that was my major in college and so forth. So a lot of times I just sit at the piano and work out the kinks in my soul. That's a way that I kind of settle myself down. I did martial arts. I haven't been doing it a while, particularly with the coronavirus, but I'm a second-degree black belt. And that was something, when you're doing martial arts, you need to focus on what you're doing. That helps me rest because it puts me in the moment. Mm-hmm. And it's doing something healthy for myself and teaching me good techniques of breathing and so forth, and physicality. And then I live in Montana. We're out in southwest Montana. So when it gets a little bit gnarly, I go out and saddle up a horse and just go for a ride. And Churchill used to say there's something about the outside of a horse that's good for the inside of a man. And I concur.
I love that.
And so I do things like, I'd love to take credit, but it's Churchill. And but it's, I do things that are intentional for me, and I live in a place of pristine beauty. We're up in the Rocky Mountains. I went outside just a few minutes ago before you and I talked, and the aspens are just golden. I mean, it's just beautiful out there in the big Montana sky and so forth. We left Nashville after being in Nashville for many years, 35 years as a matter of fact, and we moved out here to southwest Montana. It was an intentional decision. It was a hard decision, but it was good. And the humidity in Tennessee was hard on her. And so we came out to this place where we got away from the traffic and the craziness. And we got out just in time before the coronavirus hit and everything else. So we've made some intentional decisions to do these things, given the light of what we carry. And some of them have been great decisions. Some of them have been marginal decisions. And sometimes I've made horrific decisions. If you're charting your GPS coordinates to learning to be more restful and peaceful and being still within your spirit, then that helps you with the decision making. So when you're faced with tough decision, how is this helping me rest in my spirit? And sometimes it could be a toxic relationship that you're involved in. Some people are just toxic, Tula. You know this. Oh, yeah. Some people are just toxic to be around. And you say, you know what? That is keeping me so agitated to be around this person. I just need to detach from them. I don't need to sever it. I don't need to amputate the relationship. Maybe you do. I don't know. But certainly detach from it and get some space from it. Because if you got somebody that is constantly criticizing you, constantly wearing you down, then it's hard to have a sense of self-worth in that. And it could be your loved one that you're taking care of, and they could very well be doing that. And so you have to learn to detach from them and realize that their disease, their affliction, their issues are erroneous and should not be heeded. And I have to anchor myself. Well, what does God say about me? I get callers to the show, Tula, and they're struggling because they're just being, cussed out by the very person they're changing an adult diaper for.
I hear that too, so often.
And they feel like they got to take it.
Yeah, no,
well, they feel like they got to take it because it's their parents, and we got to honor thy mother and father. Scripture says, and I tell them very forcefully, you honor your mother and father, but you don't have to honor Alzheimer's,
right? And
you don't have to honor alcoholism, and you don't have to honor addiction, or abuse. You don't have to honor an impairment,
no,
or abuse or anything. You don't have to honor that. Consider the source, and the voices sometimes of others who are criticizing are way too loud, and sometimes our own voice is too loud. And we don't get to hear that still small voice of God saying to us that how much he loves us and how much he's with us in this, that there is beauty and joy in the midst of this. And that's been my message to myself and to my fellow caregivers since I started everything I do in public with this, is because I thought, Tula, you and I I'm not saying you're old, but we've been doing this a long time. We're veterans of this thing. I want to be very careful. I want to be very careful how I speak about age to them when I do this. But we've been doing this a long time, and there wasn't people that your show wasn't around when I was slogging through the mud there for so long, and my show wasn't around when you were doing it. You and I have learned these things the painful way, and we try to aggregate what we've done in a way that makes sense to other people. But we didn't have this. I mean, when I was, I became a caregiver in 1986.
Ooh, long time ago.
I mean, think about that.
Whoa.
I mean, that Reagan was still president.
There was no caregiving websites even back then. There was nothing.
No,
to go
there was
to.
nothing. I remember one time I was talking to a counselor and I was really struggling. And the counselor looked at me and says, "Well, I give you a book to read, but you're the guy to write it." And I was
and
like,
you did.
"Well, and I did." So, but I wrote it. But I wrote it to the heart of a caregiver, not to teach people how to caregive better. I don't know how to tell you how to take care of your loved one anymore. You know how to tell them to take care of mine. But I can speak to the dumpster fire that's in our hearts in those late nights when we're just crying while talking to the ceiling fan, and those lonely, lonely places that we have as caregivers. I want to say things in a way to help people learn these things that I had to learn the hard way, that maybe they can walk a little bit easier on the trail that I'm cutting through this forest, and just say, you know what, it's okay for you to be still. And it's a muscle you have to work. And that's the irony of it. Being still is intentional. It's work to be still.
Yeah.
But it's good work.
You keep using the word intentional, and I like that because you do have to be
you have to
about it.
And I promise you, if you don't make time for stillness, you're going to take time. If you don't take time for stillness, you're going to make time for illness.
Yeah.
I promise you. Your body will shut down. It will force you into this mode. It may just be 5 minutes at a time. One of the things I like to do when people call in and I hear a caregiver that's particularly despondent or something, I ask them, I say, what do you like to do? And, invariably I hear things like, I like to garden, or I like to knit, but I never have time. I said, well, just take 15 minutes to do it. You're not going to get a whole day off.
Sleeping. Yeah, you're not going to get a whole day off. Take 15 minutes while your loved one's taking a nap.
Take 15 minutes. And the next time, maybe take 15 minutes and 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go practice the piano for 3 hours. I may just go do it for about an hour. I'm not going to go ride the horse for, an overnight trip. I'm just going to go take a trail. The other day, I went out on the four-wheeler, and I went out there, and I crossed the creek, and I sat there in the creek for a minute on the four-wheeler just to let the water rush around, and I saw the golden aspens and everything else. I was gone maybe 20 minutes from the house. But it was 20 minutes that was, it was 20 minutes of soul enrichment. And if you like to garden, get your hands, to all the gardeners that are out there, just imagine for just a moment your hand plunging into rich black dirt and moving things around, and just the joy that brings you. If you enjoy needlepoint, do it. If you enjoy just knitting or something, do it. If you enjoy painting, you don't have to be great at it. Just put something on paper. Write a piece of poetry. Sing something. Whatever makes your heart lighter. You may not get the whole afternoon to do it, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Sometimes 5 to 10 minutes of doing it is enough to lighten your heart, to give you that rest that you need, and therefore give you the recharging you need to go back and take care of your loved one without being in the frenetic pace or the agitated state. It does calm you down to be able and help you center, if you will, to look at what's most important, and then finding your soul and your rest in God, and then going back to do what you're called to do.
Don't be discouraged if you don't feel much different the first time you do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. And just intentionally do it again, and intentionally do it again. And have a conversation with God. Just say it. Do it out loud. Just go someplace quiet where you just have a conversation with God. And if the first couple of words that come out of your mouth are bitterness and anger and all that stuff, that's okay. Let it out. He knows. Yeah. He's not up there, freaking out over this thing. He's right there with you. And that's what it means. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Well, you know what? As caregivers, We understand the valley of shadow of death, and you know what? It's a long valley, and he's with us in it. Talk to him.
He wants
Talk
to
to
be
him.
your,
Get it out.
your restless, your solace, but you've got to let him know, like you're saying, for him to do that. You've got to go to him.
And you do, and it's okay. Just let it out and do what needs to be done as far as that goes, and don't put these parameters or rules on yourself of saying that this is the way it has to be. Let it just be. You know, I do this a lot on my show. I have the keyboard hooked up to my board, and I'll do a modulation, a chord progression, 2-5-1, which is just, I can't do it for you on here because I don't think it'll come through. But 2-5-1 is the standard chord progression that resolves the way you want. But you could substitute, the way music is done, you substitute in other chords, and so you don't necessarily go to that one chord. You go to something different. And that's the way life is sometimes. It's going to resolve differently than we maybe expect, and maybe that our ear is tuned to. But it doesn't mean it's not good music.
Right.
It means that it's just something different, and maybe we can experience the beauty in that.
There is beauty in all kinds of music, and I know that you are an awesome piano player. I wish you could play for us today, but we will do another show and figure out how to do the technicality of it so we can do that. Because I know you love to play the hymns.
We'll figure out something.
I know you love
I do, and I've got a whole CD of that. I've got a whole CD called Songs for the Caregiver. They're just hymns that have meant something to me. Gracie sings about half of them, and I have some other friends join in on some instrumental stuff. But most of it, though, is just me at the piano. And they're just hymns that I did. And you can download this on iTunes or Amazon Music, whatever, Songs for the Caregiver. And I have found that most caregivers who listen to this they either weep or they sleep. And I'm okay with either one because both of those are release.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate it very, very much to know that they have had that release in that it's comforting to them and that they're able to find some level of solace in it.
I'm going to look it up when we hang up because I want it, because I love the beautiful hymns. They're a foundation to me. They're what I can stand strong on. You know, on Christ the solid rock I stand. That's one of my favorite hymns. Sometimes I sing it through the night and wake up, it's in my head during the day because that is the only place I can really stand, be strong, be firm, and know where my hope is for the day. I've got dozens of them that I love, and I know you do too, so I'm going to look that up.
Well, the first one is there is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God, a place where sin cannot molest, near to the heart of God. I love that hymn, and that's the first hymn on here, on this thing, and that was written by a minister, I think the Presbyterian minister, whose two nieces died of scarlet fever within a very short amount of time with each other, like in days, and it was born out of great pain. And I go through a lot of different hymns that will mean something to folks. And there's beautiful arrangements of a friend of mine playing the violin on the old rugged cross, and he goes into near the cross, and then we end up with It Is Well With My Soul. And it's just things that sustain me during brutal times. And it's me processing out my grief, my angst, and all these things. And this is so important for us as caregivers to have some kind of outlet to do it. And if my music is a conduit to help my fellow caregivers to do that, then that is a great honor for me to do that. And I tell that to people. And when you hear Gracie's voice, Gracie's a no kidding singer. And when you hear her voice, it's one of those things that I tell people often. I said, let Gracie and I just play and sing for you a little bit to help calm you down a little bit, because it's going to. She sings from a great place of pain. This is a woman who understands pain, and when she sings Balm in Gilead on this thing, man, it'll reach into your heart. And so it's just something I wanted to offer to myself and to my fellow caregivers. This is how we're going to do it together, Tula. And you and I understand this in ways that many don't. They will. They do it long enough, they will. But we've been doing this for a long time. We've had some painful journeys of loss and everything else. You guys have gone through some brutal realities.
Yeah.
And so caregivers are usually pretty angst-driven, and we're kind of frenetic, like I said, frenetic and nervous anyway. We're drawn to calm voices and places of quiet, and I try to make that possible for my fellow caregivers. And when I do my show, I let them know that this is their time, just to whatever. I'm starting a caregiver support group up here in our little community, and I put a thing in the paper about it, and you can come out and do it. And, if you just want to come and cry, cuss, or fuss, it doesn't matter. Whatever's on your heart, it doesn't matter. We're just going to hang for a while. So this is what your podcast does for so many. It just is a place where caregivers can be anchored in the stories of other caregivers and let them know that they're not alone. And they, you know what? Others have survived it, and they can too.
And they will. With every little hard thing that you go through and you make it through, I think that continues to build up your resilience and makes you stronger and makes you realize you can keep on keeping on, if you will. And you've been keeping on for over 35 years. I got to hand it to you, Peter. For my listeners, please tell me where they can go and find your book, find your CDs, and learn more about you. What website?
HopeForTheCaregiver.com. HopeForTheCaregiver.com. Our podcast out there too. It's free. The books you can get from wherever books are sold. We've got a couple of books out there, and then Gracie's record is called Resilient, and you can see more about that out there too, and see how you can get a copy of that. From the caregiver, you can download from wherever. But it's just everything can be accessed from HopeForTheCaregiver.com.
Very good. I can see why she would name her CD Resilient. She's built up a big ton of resilience.
She's tough.
Yeah, she's got to be tough.
Tougher than train smoke, I tell her.
Funny. You two together are a force to be reckoned with. You've got an amazing story. I admire the heck out of you for what you've done for 35 years. And, I'd really like to meet you and Gracie at some point. When I can get on an airplane again, you never know. I might just be out in Montana. I've got some other friends out there anyway. And I love Montana. It's beautiful.
It is indeed. It gets a little cool in the wintertime.
Yeah. It won't be in February.
Yeah, I don't look for you Floridaites coming out here that time of year. But today it's maybe, I don't know, 65 degrees. It's perfect.
That's a perfect day.
A little bit of fall in the air, but a big beautiful sky, and it's a big sky. But it's a place where Gracie and I are trying to kind of calm ourselves down too. We've had a pretty rough journey, and so we made a drastic decision to come out here, and it is drastic, but here we are. Sometimes drastic times call for drastic measures there.
And you did it, and you are finding more time to yourself, more peace, more time with Gracie, the beauty of Montana. I admire you for making that decision. I know it wasn't easy. Peter, thank you again for being on my show. I always love talking to you. This won't be the last time, for sure, because we are kindred spirits, and there's a lot of things I'd love to talk to you about. But we did a good job today of talking about resting in the Lord, where to find your rest, being intentional about doing it. I like that you really honed in on that, and just finding the peace that you need. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing to wrap it up?
I'd just like for each of your caregiving audience to just take a moment and reflect on what exactly it is that you're doing as a caregiver. You're putting yourself between a vulnerable loved one and even worse disaster. You're doing it at the expense of your wallet, your health, your own sense of fun and enjoyment, and your loss of independence, and all those kinds of things. And I would ask you to be gracious to yourself. What you're doing is extraordinary. Be gracious to yourself. Please do that. Please. I wouldn't hang around people who treat me the way I treat myself. And so I'm asking you to just be gracious to yourself. You are doing something amazing, and I applaud you for it. And keep listening to the show here, because you're going to find that comfort that's keep coming, and you got to have that regularly, just regularly. You can't just do this in an isolation bubble. So stay connected.
Thank you. Great words of wisdom. Listeners, I hope you were listening. So important to know that you are not alone. I'm here, Peter's here. There's dozens and hundreds of caregivers around that could probably learn from your experiences too. So open up a chair. And again, always, thank you for being a part of my show, for listening. And as I always say, I wish you all many, many blessings. Till next time.
Have you read the new book, Love Stories and Timeless Tips yet? It's by our own Tula Wooten, with Tula's Tips for Caregivers. Tula is a caregiver, too, as well as an expert on caregiving. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle at Amazon.com. The book is filled with touching stories of caregivers taking care of their loved ones. Each chapter has helpful ideas that we all can use. I love that Tula included a Tula's tip with each story. Her message to caregivers is clear. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of your loved one. This is a beautiful book for all caregivers to read, whether you're a part-time, full-time, or long-distance caregiver, or someone receiving care. You should get the book today. Just go to Amazon.com. Search for Love Stories and Timeless Tips by Tula Wooten.